6:01, let's call the meeting to order. Please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Mr. Merrick, can you do a roll call for attendance, please?
Sure. Councilmember Henry.
I think you're on mute.
I'm here.
Councilmember Mock.
Present.
Councilmember Sayer.
Present.
Councilmember McKnight.
Present.
Mayor Johnson.
Present. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning into tonight's meeting. We value our residents and community members, and even though our doors are temporarily closed during business hours to protect you all, we want to make sure that everyone who wants to participate in our meetings and provide input can do so. State statutes allow for the city to conduct meetings by telephone, and the council recently took action to allow our city council and commission meetings to temporarily take place remotely during this pandemic emergency. This meeting will be open to the public, but precautions as set forth by the Centers for Disease Control, the Minnesota Department of Health, and Carver County Public Health should be exercised. Alternatively, participants can join this meeting and provide comments remotely via Zoom conferencing services. Zoom is a free service and can be accessed via the following. On your mobile device, you can download the Zoom app from the App Store or Google Play, or on desktop devices, you log into zoom.us. If you want to call in for just the audio, you can dial 929-205-6099. Then you'll be prompted for a meeting ID number, and that is 882-4089-4598. So again, the number that you dial is 929-205-6099, and then the meeting ID number is 882-4089-4598. For anyone joining us by phone only, please be aware of these important instructions. We are broadcasting this meeting live. You will also need to watch the online broadcast if you would like to see any visuals that are presented during this meeting. The link is under upcoming meetings on cityofcarver.com. There could be up to a 1-minute delay from the Zoom conference call to the online broadcast, meaning the call could be up to 1 minute ahead of what you are seeing when you're watching online on the city's website. Please mute any external devices like TV, music, or computer speakers to avoid distractions when addressing the council. All participants calling into the meeting will be muted until citizens' comments are recognized. You will be prompted by the mayor to speak at the appropriate time. Lines will temporarily be muted when the mayor calls for public comment. We ask that anyone wishing to address the council ask to be recognized, be respectful, wait for your turn to speak, and don't speak over one another. It's important that all council members and members of the public can be able to hear each other and the discussion, so please speak loudly, speak clearly, and speak directly into your phone or microphone. Please listen carefully to the mayor's cues. Callers wishing to be recognized must speak up and get into the queue when prompted by the mayor. Callers will still need to provide their names and addresses for the record. Finally, different from our usual process, all actions of City Council will be taken by a roll call vote, and each will repeat their name for the record. This is a new process for us all, and we thank you for your patience and constructive feedback as we work through this unprecedented situation. We are working hard to ensure your voice is heard and while maintaining everyone's safety. Great. So with that, we are on to agenda item 3, approving the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Glenn Henry.
I'll second Christy Mock.
Right. We have a motion by Councilmember Henry and a second by Councilmember Mock. Any further discussion? All those in favor say, Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Glenn Henry, aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to community comment for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Mr. Merritt, can you tell if there's anybody on the call? It does not look like there's anybody on the Zoom call.
There's no one on the Zoom call and no one reached out from the public prior to the meeting.
All right, so we will move on to item 5.1, Sheriff's Office reports. So I reached out to Sheriff Cameron after last week's meeting where I made this statement on the George Floyd situation and trying to think of some ways that the city can respond to that. One of the comments when I posted on Facebook was something related to local policing, and I had a few questions and just invited the sheriff in to address council. So, Sheriff, I believe you've kind of prepared a few things, so I'll let you have at it if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak about these things. 3 weeks ago today, George Floyd was died at the hands of some officers who had sworn an oath to serve and protect the citizens of Minneapolis, which of course included Mr. Floyd. Since then, we have engaged in a nationwide conversation with people, some of whom are demanding police reform, and some have totally different ideas related to defunding, disbanding, dismantling, and reassembling, and all of those things. And what I really think that's about is about reestablishing trust. I think that is what those sorts of comments relate to. And, trust is really Stephen Covey would say, trust is the glue that binds, relationships. And I think that is true, whether you're talking about your relationships with your friends or your family. The ones that you're closest to are likely the ones who you have the greatest amount of trust with. And I think that same concept holds true when you're talking about citizens and their government. In this context, we happen to be talking about policing and law enforcement, but I think it goes to all of government services, that it has to be built on a foundation of trust. In fact, if we look at the final report of the President's task force on 21st century policing, which was published in the spring of 2015, the first pillar relates to building trust and legitimacy, and that's just how critical it is. It's number one. So I think that for the most part in Carver County, we have a good, trusting relationship with our citizenry and with our other elected officials. But what I can tell from the emails and the conversations and information that I have received since George Floyd's death is, while we have the trust, I don't think we have a real good understanding, a community-wide understanding of how policing works in Carver County, why it works, which steps we have taken to prevent the types of incidents that have happened in many major metropolitan areas around the nation. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that today with all of you, as what I would suggest is likely just not just, but it is a first step towards helping to build that understanding with our citizens. A couple of things that we've been doing. We have begun in 2018. We started some work on intercultural discussions and studies within the sheriff's office. When I was elected and took office in 2019, I had a reading requirement for our management team, and it was a book related to implicit biases, and it's not a life-altering book, but it is a soup to nuts, gives you a broad stroke understanding of the concepts and drills into implicit bias. And from that book, each of my management team, in order to receive the highest performance rating, had to develop some goals that they could implement and push down in throughout the rest of the organization. And the idea here was that one size fits all cookie cutter coursework doesn't necessarily work as well as we would like it to. So I had my management team build stuff that they thought would work for their own group. This week now is a continuation of that. We're starting, my staff and I are going to a course. It's called The Road to Racial Justice, and it's really about building systemic change from within the organization. And this is work that we had planned out, late last year, early this year. And so the timing is really perfect for us. But the idea here is for the management team to basically build the foundational knowledge and ensure that we all have the same vocabulary and rough understanding of the types of things that we're seeing. From that, then, it's my intention to host some critical communications with the citizenry to kind of build an understanding about what when I'm talking citizens here, I'm talking mostly people of color, to get a better understanding of how they're perceiving our policing, which things do they believe need to be adjusted, and the challenge will be making sure that we stay focused on what's happening in Carver County, because of course that's where my span of control is. I can't control what's happening in Atlanta, for example, so we really need to talk locally. But I think it underscores that local government works well because you can send an email to your sheriff and your sheriff will respond. You will be on the guest list to come and speak and talk about your own personal experiences and your ideas. And we then, as the elected leaders, work with the city councils, and we will make sure that our policies and practices are consistent with the things we learned in that conversation. My end goal in this for the organization is to first ensure that our policies are written such that they are reflective of our core values, which I think they already are, and also reflective of that conversation that we've had. And I think we're probably going to be okay on the policy end of things. I mean, we'll get to tweak some language, but I think the core concepts are probably already pretty well covered. It's the training piece is the other part. Is now I have to build a training plan that is supportive of that policy and send the employees out to with a new or a better or a honed understanding of the policy. So I would look for that work to begin here this fall. I would anticipate it would be maybe 3 or 4 sessions, each one building on the previous one. And then the 4th session, the idea would be to kind of connect all the dots and stitch all those meetings together. And that would just be step 1. I mean, this is a process that will have to go on more than just this one time. But we have to start with getting an understanding first. And so that's where I'm hoping to land. During the course of this, I did receive some questions from several citizens related to our use of force policies, and some suggested that we start by incorporating the concepts set forth in Campaign 0, which has an offshoot hashtag of 8 Can't Wait to it. And basically what 8 Can't Wait is Campaign 0, let me back up a little bit. Campaign 0 had done some analysis on major metropolitan cities and concluded that agencies that adopted and applied these 8 particular policies had lower use of force incidents than metropolitan cities who did not have those policies. And that's where the 8 Can't Wait gives the 8 policies. And basically those policies are de-escalation through verbalization. They want your use of force policy to require you to attempt to verbalize, instruct, and try to de-escalate and calm before using force. They want you to have a use of force continuum, or sometimes they'll call it a confrontational continuum, where there's a bunch of different models that are out there. Some you call it a use of force ladder, where you can go up and down the use ladder, with the first one being a very soft-handed approach, and then the top rung being deadly force and everything in between. And so there, you can go up and down that ladder to meet the circumstances. We have one that is more linear in focus, but the premise is the same. It's a rheostat. You can turn it up, you can turn it down, and smattered throughout all of it is verbal dialogue, because it's so important to be communicative with the person, telling them what you want them to do, telling them what you want them to stop doing, and asking for their compliance. The third policy is banning chokeholds. They're incorrectly called chokeholds. They're actually more of a vascular neck restraint, where we're not cutting off the airway, we're cutting off blood flow to the brain, slowing it, not stopping it. Require a warning before shooting, and in this context, they're talking about a verbal warning to the person before using force. But that's also consistent with all of the other, and as I talked about, our confrontational continuum, where we have verbalization intermixed throughout all of the levels within the confrontational continuum. And so to verbalize prior to using deadly force is certainly consistent with our policies and our confrontational continuum. Now, of course, sometimes it's not feasible. We've been very fortunate here in Carver County, where we have had very few instances like this, but in other cities where it has been a straight-up gunfight, verbalizing, what you might do or might not do becomes a little bit more complicated. So, the policy should restrict shooting at moving vehicles. The policy should ask that the officers exhaust all other means before using deadly force. Here again, that's part of the confrontational continuum, is that you want to use the least amount of force necessary to effect the arrest or gain control. And you want to try to use them when using them is realistically the lower levels of force I'm talking about. You'll want to use them when it's realistically feasible, when it could work, and it does not expose the officer to unreasonable levels of danger, right? So, for example, if the subject is armed with a knife, we would not ask a deputy to try to use a low-level escort hold, which is an empty hand sort of control in that scenario, right? We're going to let them have some distance and use a higher level of force to attain that. Duty to intervene when peers see their peer group engaged in unlawful conduct. They do have a duty to intervene. Here in the sheriff's office policies, I think the policy exists, but I think we can enhance the language to make it more clear what the intent of the policy is. And then the eighth one is comprehensive reporting. And in our organization, we have a policy that requires deputies to report any use of force beyond that of a routine escort hold. And a routine escort hold is simply if I was to put one hand on your wrist and one on your elbow and just kind of walk with you to where we're going. If you do anything more than that, we have an expectation that you write a comprehensive report detailing all of the facts and circumstances. So that was a long way to get there, but I think it's important to run through those 8 policies and point out that those are, in fact, good policies. In fact, they're such good policies, we incorporated them into our policy manual quite some time ago. And, that's not true in every agency across the nation. In Minnesota, the Minnesota Peace Officer, the Post Board, has pretty much all of those concepts loosely incorporated in their model policies, and then our policy happens to be a little bit more restrictive than theirs. We will continue to evaluate our other policies kind of in this same realm, and those policies being impartial policing, how we receive and process citizen complaints. We have mechanisms in place for receiving complaints, and we have an impartial policing policy, but through this community discussion, I'm hoping to shape the language in both of those a little bit better. And then, I want to point out also that I committed a long time ago to ensuring that the citizens have a voice in our policy decisions. In 2019, I formed a citizen advisory board, and I pulled them together a handful of times to talk about various policy decisions and to get their perspective. I think it's a fairly good cross-cut of our citizenry. I have citizens from the West End, citizens from the East End, men, women, minorities. Just one of the things that I know would be of interest to many people here relates to body-worn cameras. I know that is a very popular thing for people to, and I think people think they just all cops have them, and that's not true. And so we've done some looking at them, and we know that those cameras for our organization would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to buy the cameras, the software, the storage, all of those pieces that go along with that. And when I talked it through with the Citizen Advisory Board, we got down to priorities. They all agreed it's a great technology. You should have them at some point. But right now, if you're going to spend $250,000, we think you should spend it on this. And frankly, I agreed. What we were talking about was mental health and our response to mental health and how we do that. And that was just a higher priority in 2019 for us. So, and going into 2020, because remember my budget was set by Sheriff Jim Olson in 2018. And so I was allowed to make some adjustments to it. But so when I was building the 2020 budget is when I was having this conversation with the advisory board. There is support by the county attorney's office and by the county administrator. I suspect we would get support from the county board to do that. However, I would also need support from all of our contract cities as well, because the cost of those cameras are personnel costs, not flat costs. It's a per camera basis in terms of when you calculate the cost for the data storage and the data usage. And the majority of our deputies are employed because of the police contract. So that would take some conversation at all of the city levels to do that. So, anyways, I just think that the idea of this critical discussion with the citizens about our the race relations and racial justice and implicit bias, I think that is, it's a continuation of my commitment to make sure that our citizenry has a seat at the table in these policy decisions. And with that, I would stand for any questions if the council has any.
All right. Well, thank you, first of all. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate, you touched on it kind of early on in your presentation about how the sheriff will respond. And I think it's important, I pick up the phone, you answer it. If somebody sends you an email, you respond to them. I also appreciate you going specifically through those 8 can't wait and kind of drawing the parallels to what's being done, because I think you're right. I understand our contract, I understand our relationship, but I won't profess to be an expert in your business. And I think there's a lot more below the surface. So I appreciate you coming in and taking the time to explain that. So thank you. Any questions from council? See Glenn shaking no. Go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate going through the 8 can't wait and understanding what our community police force has for policies and where we maybe can make some improvements. I think these things are really on the tops of a lot of people's mind. And as you mentioned earlier, it's really important that we get a improved community-wide understanding of what policing is. Does the Carver County Sheriff's Office have plans to like communicate some of this stuff more broadly, maybe over social media or other means, just help to educate the constituents on, you know, where we are at with some of these policies and top of mind discussions?
Yes, I do. In fact, before coming here today, I was preparing a PowerPoint presentation to take the show on the road, as it were, because it's an important conversation to have. And so I will be before Chanhassen City Council to talk specifically about our policies, what they mean, and, you know, what the specific provisions are. I'll do this roughly the same presentation for the county board, and then I would be happy to do that for any other city council who had an inclination and wanted to hear the information. I would estimate that would take probably about 15 to 20 minutes. And on Jason's standard time, that's about 40 minutes. So when you're building your budget, time budget, just know that, you know, I would be looking for about a half hour to get through it, and then we'd field some questions.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions, Lori, Christy? No. All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much. Again, really appreciate your time and you're spending 15 Jason standard time minutes with us tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye now.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Moving on. Governmental fee analysis. Victoria Houthouse. I said that wrong.
Good evening. That was just fine. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen here. So tonight I was asked to present to you 3 analysis that we completed for the city. Nod of heads, can you see this PowerPoint presentation? Okay, great. So my name is Vicki Holthouse. I'm a partner with our AEM Financial Solutions group, and our group specifically focuses on city operations and provides operational and consulting services for cities. So we partnered with your team to work through 3 different studies, and I'm going to spend just a few minutes at the top of your agenda to walk through the results of those analysis with you. But just at a high level, the first one was our governmental fee analysis, and the goal of that analysis, the city has a really great system in place for determining cost recovery on some of the different services that are offered. But the goal of that project was to come up with an allocation system to also include indirect costs that should be accounted for when determining profitability, or let's just say cost recovery on some of these services. The second project that we completed was a personnel allocation review. And the goal with that project was to either confirm or make recommendations about the city's existing position allocations and how they break out by department and fund. And so I'll talk about that for just a couple of minutes. And then finally, to take a look at the debt service on the City Hall facility and determine if an allocation was appropriate for attributing some of the cost of that debt service to the utility funds, because right now it's all being considered governmental debt and paid for with property taxes. So the first study that I'm going to talk about is the governmental fee analysis. So as I mentioned, the city does a really good job of determining what direct costs it has in performing certain city services. For example, the cost of issuing a building permit, or the cost of providing a park rental. Typically, when cities complete those cost studies to set their fees, they take a look at salaries, they take a look at operating expenses, and they take a look at depreciation on equipment or structures that are specific to that city service that's being provided. What is not commonly done is to take a look at all of the city's indirect costs and how they may be allocated to the cost of providing those services, or spread fairly and proportionately amongst all of the different services the city is providing. And so the goal of this project was to use a federal cost allocation system that's accepted in different federal grants and in different programs to really come up with that allocation system that the city could use. So that way, when cost recovery is being analyzed and determined, we have that mechanism then for allocating things like indirect depreciation. So City Hall, for example, which serves so many different city services and functions. So the result of that is once you start to consider some of those other indirect costs, really what you start to see is the cost recovery is not as favorable as what we may have once thought when we were just considering those direct costs for the department. So an example of that is within the building department, we know that we have inspection fees that we can attach to that revenue that we're bringing in. But we maybe haven't always had a system for allocating some of those other administrative or other central services to the cost of those different city programs that we're providing. And so this chart just illustrates for you at a very high level what cost recovery looks like once you start to mix in those indirect costs into the equation. And so this becomes really important when we report out to different organizations. Like, for example, we're working with the city right now to complete the 2019 building report, the annual report of revenues and expenditures related to building and development. And it's critically important that we include those indirect costs when we're coming up with that calculation and reporting out on what the city's cost recovery looks like. So I think I hit on the high points as far as what our major outcomes or major outcomes of the project were, but we provided a system that the city can use for calculating those indirect costs and applying them to city services. We provided an allocation rate based on the study that we did of 2018 results that the city can apply going forward when they're both setting fees on an annual basis and or reporting out to other agencies on what the city's profitability or break even looks like on some of these services. The next study that we completed for the city was, again, to either affirm or provide recommendations on the city's position allocations by department and fund. So we conducted a 2-week time study and we asked staff to record their time in 15-minute increments over that period of 14 days. And then we provided an analysis to city management on how the actual time worked compared to the city's budget assumptions. And we were excited to see that the time study really validated the city's existing position allocation with some minor modifications that we suggested. And one of the biggest recommendations that we made in doing this study is that really this is something the city is going to want to consider periodically reviewing internally, just based on the seasonal nature of some of the positions. For example, snow plowing affects us at certain points of the year and not in others. And so if you conduct a time study just based on a short period of time, it's important that you kind of confirm that throughout the year, periodically or over time. This is just a visual that kind of shows you how the time study results came through versus what the budget allocations are in the city's annual budget process. So again, fairly consistent overall with some minor modifications that the city can look at as you're going into your 2021 budget planning season. Okay, so then the last component of our study was to take a look at the city's existing debt service allocation for City Hall. So presently, there's no allocation of that debt service payment going to the utility funds. So the goal of this project was to determine if there was a matrix or a nexus, so to say, for allocating a portion of that City Hall debt out to the utilities. So again, we used the information from the time study to help drive that analysis and that conversation. And really the reason for that is because the methodology is consistent. When we take a look at that indirect cost allocation plan and those federal guidelines, our driver for doing those allocations is direct wages. And so the basis for the allocations to the utility funds is consistent and it follows that same methodology. And so based on the analysis that we did, we'd recommend that the city allocate 11% of that debt service payment to water, 6.4% to sewer, and 2.8% to stormwater. And so now I just wanted to open it up and see if you have any questions for me on the work that we did, or the process for incorporating that indirect cost allocation system into future rate setting.
Any questions?
Just wanted to,
Sorry, Brent, I'm just trying to stop share here. There we go.
Mayor, Council, I know some of this stuff isn't this really isn't kind of fancy type of work, but it's critical to have that opposed to not having it and someone questioning how we're charging fees and then scrambling to come up with a methodology for how we arrived. So part of this is best practices, and there is margin of error. You know, it's a 2-week snapshot, and so depending upon what staff was doing in that certain week, there are probably some discrepancies in kind of what it would look like over a total year period. I've been working with Kathy and the department heads on adjusting some salary distribution, as well as you'll see probably roughly about 75,000 of the $375,000 debt service on City Hall be spread to the enterprise funds in the 2021 budget.
Any questions for Brent or Vicky? So Joey nodding no. I see Christy nodding no. See a nod no from Glenn. Okay. All right. Brent, you answered the one question that I had during the presentation, was about that City Hall debt service allocation and how that was going to affect things going forward. So thank you for anticipating that. And Vicki, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. All right. Moving on, the 2019 adjusted financial statements, the audit. Justin Nielsen from Abdo. Go ahead, Justin.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me correct?
Yep.
Good. I'll do the same thing as Vicki. Everyone can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks for having me tonight, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to present our 2019 audited financial statements. I also just like to always start my presentation by thanking the people that have helped us out the most, so Kathy mostly, and Brent to a degree too. So thank you so much to both of them for all their hard work getting us to the end of the audit here. So it was a little different process with remote this year, so we definitely worked through it and got her done. So I'll just start and go through a quick introduction of what we're going to go over, just going over the auditor's opinion. I'm going to go over the general fund results, and I'll go over the other governmental fund results, as well as the enterprise fund results. And I will finish with the key performance indicators, or just some charts that compare the city of Carver to other cities under 10,000 population and in Carver County. So in 2019, we did arrive at an unmodified clean audit opinion for the city. So that is the audit opinion the city is striving for. So good thing there. How we arrived at that opinion is we, again, did our audit remotely this year, testing transactions around paying bills, paying employees, looking at what the council's getting to make decisions and things of that nature. So with that, that's how we came at our opinion. And we did have one finding that I will go over on the next slide. We also tested a number of different things related to Minnesota legal compliance and Minnesota state statutes. So again, the Office of the State Auditor does put guides on their website that we are required to test. And I'd just like to give a couple examples of those. And one is timely paying of bills. And the second example would be testing of contracts, bidding. So with that, I'll just flip to the next slide. Just go over the one finding we had. So we didn't have any findings related to Minnesota legal compliance. The one finding we do have for 2019, again, the existing finding, the one that has been there in the past, is the preparation of financial statements. So again, this one a common audit finding for smaller cities or cities within Carver's size. Just the risk to point out that we did draft the financial statements as the audit firm, and to note that they are the responsibility of the city. So nothing new here. Again, something that's been there in the past. So overall, just the one finding. So good there. So, and that's kind of reflected on the next slide as well. We do like to just update anything that we had from last year that was removed. So one of the findings that was removed from last year was an unauthorized investment. As part of those OSA or the Minnesota state statutes, they do require city investments to have a certain rating. And one of the investments did carry a rating under those compliance statutes. So I guess the thing to point out here, the city still does own that investment. It just did improve in its rating, so something to monitor in the future. We'll get into the general fund results for 2019 and look at a chart comparing the fund balance as it compares to the future year's budget, the fund balance policy of the city. So as we look at the chart here, we have the big detail and then we have the chart on the bottom. I think the thing to point out overall is that the city has kept within that 50% unrestricted fund balance the past 4 years, mainly due to a city policy to transfer any remaining funds or funds over at 50% to future capital or special projects. So it's a 10% above the city's fund balance policy. And again, it continues to go up a little bit along with the city's budget. So overall, positive trend and a really clean chart there to show where the city's at in its general fund for the past 5 years. So for 2019, just looking at the general fund budget to actual, looking at how we got to our $1.3 million in fund balance in the general fund. So as we look, the city did budget a balanced budget or a zero increase in the general fund. So when we look at what actually happened in 2019, revenues did have a positive variance of close to $400,000 there. Again, mainly related to some of those permit fees and some development related activity. So as we look toward down to the bottom there, some of the things that stuck out as things that were other budget variances, the one that sticks out mainly is the transfers out. And again, I already kind of touched on that a little bit. The city did transfer out about $300,000 to its special projects fund for future capital purchases. And again, overall, the fund balance did increase about $91,000 there. So again, overall positive, staying within that fund balance policy. And overall, a good year when I consider transferring $300,000 to future needs. So a quick chart here just to show a 3-year trend in the general fund revenues and expenditures. Just to show it graphically, any trends that would stick out. I think the things that stick out to me, again, in 2019, the green bar there for permits, as well as public safety expenditures, kind of offsetting some of those things in the with building-related activity, as well as the big transfer in the green bar in 2019 as well for other there. So those are kind of the things that stick out that I've, again, kind of already explained. We'll switch gears and go into the city's other funds. So we'll start with the special revenue funds. I won't go too long on this one. The city does have 4 special revenue funds. The first 3 are committed for future use in EDA, cemetery, and community events. The last is the Park and Ride Transit Fund, which is at a deficit, which is what makes up this part of the graph here. So again, just something to be aware of, no huge variances. I think things are being tracked there. There's plans in place for all those funds. Slide 10 is a little bit bigger. The city does have a number of different capital project funds and a lot of things going on with capital project related activities. So, the major funds in 2019 did turn out to be the park development, City Hall construction, Commerce Drive, and 2019 street improvement project, mainly all because of the expenditures that took place in those funds. So if you look at the overall total in the fund balance and the related to all the city's capital project funds, when it's all said and done, very consistent to 2018. So even with all those expenditures, things kind of did end up fairly similar, probably mainly due to some of the bond activity. But if we kind of compare that to the chart below, we look at where those funds are made up, we just see that most of the funds are sitting either in restricted for future expenditures on some of those projects and assigned for future capital projects related to the special project or a few other of the projects related there. The last governmental chart here is just to look at the future debt service payments. We just put together charts here to show graphically how many bonds the city does have in their governmental funds, what the future interest payments are, comparing the total bonds outstanding to the total assets, and just showing again graphically what those payments are expected to be over the next 10 years. So looking at that chart between somewhere in the $1.2 million to the $1.4 million range over the next 10 years. The last thing I always point out is just to look at the future bonds and the future interest, obviously less than the total assets currently. The difference there will be made up of future tax revenues. Again, I'll switch gears again and just go over the city's enterprise funds, and I'll start with the water fund. So what we're looking at here is a water fund cash flow from operation chart. We're going to see this for the water, the sewer, and the storm. What we have is 4 bars. We have the operating costs and debt payments in the green and gray. We have the operating receipts and the connection fees as the purple bar. So again, ideally we'd probably want to look at the blue and the purple exceeding the green and the gray. So in 2019, with some big connection fees, the water fund did experience some positive results there and did have those bars exceeding its 2019 debt payments and operating costs. If we look at the next chart and look at the overall cash balance within the water fund, again, it kind of equates really well to where the cash balance ended up. And again, this chart does show the past 4 years, and looking at just kind of at, again, a trend there. We also include a minimum target balance, which is outlined as the following year's debt service payment plus 6 months of operation. So just a suggested minimum there for what a good enterprise fund would have. So again, overall, positive, increased about $1 million and above that target balance. We'll see the same two
Justin,
charts. Oh, yep, go ahead.
I have a question on the water. I think you kind of stated this, but just to make sure I understood, if you can go back one more slide. So when we have an increase of the purple and blue bars, the incoming above our costs and payments, that rolls over essentially in that fund. That's what you're talking about on that next slide, is sort of that fund level that we have to cover future operating costs and just kind of additional expenditures, right?
Yes. I think
Okay.
the simple answer is yes. I think one thing that I did not mention, in these charts, you don't see anything related to capital related activity. So
Okay.
when we think about connection fees, those a lot of times do go for some of those debt and some of those capital related payments. So
Okay.
I think the main message would be that these charts and any balance related to the cash balance should be tied to the city's CNP plan going forward.
Okay.
Councilmember McKnight, as a follow-up, if you think about the upcoming debt service for the water treatment plant, the city's 1-year debt service and 6 months operating, that target balance is going to go up exponentially.
Got it.
At issuance, and so this is what we were anticipating and frankly needing as it relates to our long-term plan and charting out connection fees to fund the water treatment plant.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
We'll skip back ahead and just go back to that sewer fund. So again, we'll see the same chart here, looking at those 4 bars. So looking at here, I think just the blue and the purple, just a little bit short of those green and gray bars. So if we flip forward to the next chart, I think you can see kind of how that works. Just looking at that a little bit. Over the past 4 years, the trend has been just kind of a little bit on the downward direction, likely related to some capital-related purchases and things of that nature. So again, obviously just the main message is to review, and I know the city has with their rate studies and analysis and things like that. So I'm just making sure to tie those into the CIP plan. The last is the stormwater fund, and this one has, again, shown some increases in the past few years, anticipated for some capital and current needs too. But overall, this one, mainly with the stormwater access charges, does show a good trend there in the right direction for the city's stormwater cash fund or cash balance chart. So as we look here, this one similarly has gone up about $1 million in the past a couple of years and above that target. And again, the assumption would be that with some future related costs, that minimum target balance would probably increase in the future. My last slide to go over with just the funds is just to kind of tie everything together and just show one quick chart of the city's cash balance by fund type. And just look at the trend over the past 3 years and looking where things were at the end of 2017 and even where they're at today at the end of 2019. Kind of a big increase there. You know, there's a lot of things going on in the growth city. It's just a lot of things, and some of these charts can vary year over year. So I think it's just a good thing to point out that with everything going on, things are trending kind of in the right direction. Even though there's a lot of money going out, there's a lot coming in as well. So something to take away from that. I'll just go real quick at these key performance indicators. Again, I mentioned this at the top, but the class 4 cities are cities with the population in the whole state of Minnesota under 10,000. Cities in Carver County are also a comparison as well. So as we look at the city of Carver, we look at the first one as it compares to tax rates. You know, the city of Carver's tax rate in that 47 to 50% range is below both the cities in the 4th class as well as the cities in Carver County. So again, something positive to look at there. Now, the taxes per capita, a little bit of a same but different chart, a little bit different way of looking at taxes and just how to compare. You know, Carver is kind of right in line with those. You know, if we look at 2019, my assumption would be that if those comparisons would probably increase next year as well. So kind of right in line with those cities in the class and the cities in Carver County. So the last one I'll just go over formally is just looking at the long-term debt per capita. So this one again does show the city of Carver a little bit higher, but again, I don't think it's anything that's to be not expected with a city with as much growth as Carver has. Very common for cities, again, with that growth to have those debt service needs and not uncommon if you were going to compare it to some of those other cities in those classes there. So I'm not going to formally go over the rest just for sake of time, but does anybody have any questions on any of the other charts or anything else that I went over?
Just a really quick question. What is considered a class 4 city?
Yep, so I guess it's any city under 10,000 that isn't a cash-based city. The cash-based city is generally really smaller cities, kind of in that 1,000 or under population. Just for comparison's sake, we take those out.
Joy, go ahead.
On the last two key performance indicators about the water fund debt service coverage and sewer fund debt service coverage, why is Carver negative?
Yep, so I'll just explain these two quick. So when we look at this, if we look at the city's cash flow as it relates to, again, if we just look at specifically the water fund, when we look at what it means to have 100% or 0% is the city would have operational income of $50,000 to pay $50,000 worth of debt service expenditures. That would be 100. That would be 100%. So, in some of those things, again, like Brent mentioned too, with the connection fees, and this isn't that wouldn't be included in operational debt service coverage. And again, it is something that's on the increase, and I know it's something that's been considered on how the city gets revenues for the water fund, but the 0% or the negative basically just ties to how much it's getting, the fund is making on its operational cash intake.
Okay, thank you. That was my only other question.
All right, thank you. Lori or Glenn, any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead,
I
Lori.
have a question. Justin, on your slide 4, you talked a little bit about there was one finding. and I got the impression that it wasn't a surprise. It's happened in the past. Can you tell me more about this, and like, is it something we can prevent? Or like, is it even that, is it concerning? Is it something we can get ahead of so in a year from now we're not seeing this repeat?
I would, let's see. So this finding is really kind of a cost-benefit analysis of additional work, additional hirings of CPAs, oversight, things of that nature, or having the city formally draft their financial statements themselves internally. So the risk, I think there's a formal review and there's stopgaps and things that are being done to mitigate the risk with review by Brent and Kathy specifically of the financial statements. We, again, just require the finding mainly because of the things that we have knowledge in with GASB standards and accounting related standards and things of that nature. So that's the reason for the finding. There is a write-up in our city management letter on some recommendations and things that could eliminate this finding in the future. But to answer your big question, is it of a big concern? I don't think so. I think it's something that is very common for cities. Auditors draft the financial statements for a large majority of cities in the state, so it's not something that is too alarming in my opinion.
I think probably the only path that a city our size has of eliminating that finding is if we'd hire a finance director that's a certified public accountant that could put together that. But this is probably the 20th audit that I've been through. It's been in every single audit that I've been involved with just because of the size of cities that I have worked in. And I would venture to say that probably just 80 to 90% of the class 4 cities have this same finding.
Yeah, I think that's probably safe. 75% is a safe number probably. Yeah.
It isn't anything that, when we give our audited financial statements to rating agencies, when we go out for bond funds, it isn't anything that impacts our rating. It's just it's a element of the environment that we have as far as it relates to staff size for our city.
Okay. No, that helps put it into perspective. I'm more comfortable with it knowing that if we wanted additional eyes looking at it or expertise, that would definitely cost us money. So thanks for helping answer that.
Yeah, and Lori, it's almost become something that I've anticipated. It's never not been on our audits. I'm on the board of the CAP agency, which is a small nonprofit. And that's also, we received the same finding, and they have 3 folks in their accounting department. So it's really common, and I think it is a finding of the audit, and it's not necessarily a positive, but I don't necessarily think of it as big and scary and, we're going to lose our rating or anything like that. So, Glenn, any questions from you? Let's see. I assume no. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see you from where I was at. Okay, all right. Well, and Justin, you went over it a little bit, but I just want to take the opportunity to, Kathy, give you a huge shout out. I know that this is a major undertaking. I know that it's a major undertaking in a normal or a regular year, but this year with all the COVID stuff and social distancing, it was probably, although you've never used this term, especially challenging. So thank you so much for all of your work and your diligence and making sure that this was to run as smoothly as possibly, albeit from a socially distant length away. So thank you very much. All right, if there is nothing else, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2019 audit as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2019 audit as presented.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Mock.
I'll second.
And a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Merrick, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Henry,
Glenn Henry, aye.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Take care. See ya.
All right, moving on. There are no public hearings this evening. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Councilmember Sayer
I will second it.
and a second by Councilmember Henry. Mr. Mayor, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Henry,
Glenn Henry, aye.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
and Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. All right, moving along, no unfinished business. Under new business, we have 9.1, the American Tower lease. Mr. Harris.
Sorry, it took me a minute to find the mute. This is a matter that the council has seen in the past. Right around the first of the year, Mr. Merrick made a presentation to the council concerning the existing lease for the cellular communications tower that sits behind the Public Works Fire Station. Mr. Merrick indicated that there's a possibility of reducing or terminating the existing lease, converting it to an easement in exchange for a lump sum payment. Without getting too much into the weeds, I think that's something that appealed to the council because there's uncertainty around the existing lease, including the significant risk that the technology change, the lease could be canceled, thereby depriving the city of the income. Council provided Mr. Merrick with some direction, and he was able to negotiate an easement for a fixed sum one-time payment of $385,000. Entering into that easement will, of course, terminate the existing lease and the periodic payment stream that comes from the lease. The easement documents were inordinately complicated. And I will spare the council the long process of getting them resolved, but I think it's important that the council know that at the end of the day, when we got down to the last couple nitty points, they got resolved because Mr. Merrick, as always, is the ultimate conciliator, and on a conference call a week ago Monday, was able to give kind of some key points and guidance that got regular people on the other side off the dime, and we got it resolved. The documents in question in the process of this, there's an option agreement to purchase a communications easement. This is a document that the city would sign, assuming it wants to move forward, which gives ATC 6 months to decide if they want to move forward. Anticipating the question that one of you should surely ask, which is, particularly if you've looked at any of the legal fee bills, which is, why are they just entering an option now when we've negotiated the entire easement? Which is a pretty reasonable question, and one that I certainly ask. I know from talking to ATC's council and representative that they've had some issues in the past where they do all their due diligence and then they think they have a deal on the easement and they don't. So they have a rather convoluted structure. They negotiate the entire easement up front, then get an option. They move forward on the option, they pay you, and the easement's already signed, it closes, and it's done. Would that be my favorite process? No, but it was their process, and we were able to get it worked through. I can tell you that the most objectionable provisions in the easement got worked out. The really nasty indemnity provisions that would have tied up the city came out. Obligations of the city to zone it, however, EPC may have wanted it, came out. a non-compete provision which would have precluded the city from running their own wireless communications when the fire station and the public works building came out. Certain restrictions on use came out. Probably the biggest give is the city agrees that it won't build a structure taller than the existing structure on the site. That was probably the last compromise. The agreement as a 99-year easement is fair and reasonable. I stand ready to answer any questions the council has about a particularly complicated document, but I don't think it's necessary or you need me to go through it line by line or in any great detail. So I'm here to answer any questions. If it is acceptable, the appropriate action tonight is to adopt the resolution and consent, which would then authorize the execution of the option agreement and the easement and assignment. Just so you know, assuming those documents are executed, I will be forwarding originals to ETC. They will conduct their due diligence, which will involve things like they've got to do a survey. And I suspect sometime within the next 6 months, they'll close. In my experience on these types of transactions, particularly when they have an existing tower in place, I'd be very surprised if they don't close. So it'd be my realistic expectation that this closes and they fund the $385,000 in the third or fourth quarter of this year.
Go ahead, Joy.
Thank you for sparing us all of the details of this agreement. I really appreciate it. Glad we've worked out some of the big objectionable things. I think the only thing I have a question about this option agreement, is there anything in here that could be significantly renegotiated, say the price or something like that, after this period of due diligence?
You know, it isn't going to be renegotiated by us. If they come back and want to renegotiate the price, conceptually they could, but recognize that the city could just say, no, keep making the lease payments.
Okay.
You know, they wouldn't have, both sides really made a mathematical decision and business risk decision. From the city's perspective, it's like, okay, how far out did the lease go and what's the likelihood of income stream? Weighed against the risk that if technology changes, they terminate the lease and we don't get any more money. The analytics aren't that much different on their side. You know, from their perspective, you know, a lot of this is just is accounting 101. They have an ongoing leasehold obligation that they have to book. Once they pay it off as a lump sum easement, it becomes an asset on their books, not a liability that they're carrying. So both parties had a motivation to arrive at a fixed sum. The motivations weren't necessarily the same.
Okay. All right. You answered my question, and you already answered my other questions that I had been going through your sort of introduction. So I'm good. Thank you.
Lori, do you have a question?
No questions.
Okay, sorry, just saw you get off mute as an anticipated question.
I did.
Glenn, questions?
None.
No? Christy? All right. Larry, I think you did answer most of my questions, just confirming that we will still be able to use for our city and fire department purposes whatever we need to back there.
Our limitations, the one give in all of this was the city agreed they wouldn't build a structure taller than the height of the existing building. Other than that, yeah.
And so that means that in 75 years, we cannot build a brand new 3-story fire station there.
That's right, without going back. That's correct. Their issue is what really came out in the negotiations was height of our use impacts their ability to receive communications. And that was their biggest.
Okay. And we're only, that restriction is only on that property.
Yes, yeah, let's be really direct about this. If the city, the city acquired this site from William Mueller and Sons 20 years ago. Let's say you go by another 200 feet to the south of it from William Mueller's, you put an 8-story building at it. Not part of this deal.
Okay, I was only thinking 3 stories, but thank you. Okay, that's it for my questions. Does anyone want to make a motion or ask any more questions?
I was gonna make a motion. I'm missing the paperwork on exactly how to say it, so I might need some coaching here, but I
Sure.
would like to make to move forward with the American Tower lease as presented today.
There's.
I will second that.
It's resolution number 122-20.
That for resolution number 122-20.
All right, we have a motion by Council Member Sayer. Christie,
I will second it.
I'm gonna give that one to Christy because she said it before Lori clarified. All right, any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. 9.2, street maintenance planning. Mr. Merrick.
Yeah, just as a side note before I get started, closed circuit to Chief Trimble, the mayor's comment on a 3-story fire station was a hypothetical, not. I'm gonna share my screen here. Can you see the memo, Council?
Yep.
So this is a follow-up from past work session discussion, where the city engineer Dan Lanas reviewed number of streets that could use a mill and overlay. The city is ostensibly switching over, excuse me, from a kind of a crack fill and seal coat method to or maintenance to mill and overlay. And so we discussed a number of options as far as how to proceed with that. So I'm going to start with strategy B, which the council is familiar with from the last work session, where we talked about our annual maintenance, then contemplated a special capital fund transfer, which, as you just heard from the auditors, we had a $300,000 transfer, so we have I think about $360,000 in that fund as it stands now. And then contemplating looking at 6th Street West, and as you can see, Kirchy Hill and High in 21, Carver Bluffs Parkway and Carver Creek Circle in 22. And then told the council that we'd come back with various strategies. So I'm kind of dating myself, but think of it as Lincoln Logs. You know, you have all the tools. You can build it any way you want. So we've laid out a strategy A, B, and C. So this is B. This for conversation purposes, we laid out a strategy A, which you can see here. There's a slightly less special capital fund contribution of $200,000, and we're really looking at then taking a hard look at or big project this year, which would include Kirchy and High, and frankly, we have a bid number for that project already that's contained within the 2019 street project for $140,000. But then also would try to tackle Carver Bluffs Parkway and Carver Creek Circle, and with a $120,000 budget allocation, which is up from the $72,000 that was for 2020. Would look at trying to take on Ramsey, and then kind of a switch in direction is looking to incorporate the improvements to 6th Street in conjunction with, there's already improvements being made to 6th Street with the Jonathan Carver Parkway project. This would just extend that. One of the other things that we found out recently too, as it relates to municipal state aid funding, as you recall, the city will start receiving that once we verified a population of 5,000. There's an outside chance, and I think very remote, but it's at least worth pursuing, that we can document that we're at 5,000 right now. The state aid office primarily uses the Met Council's estimate. Right now we're at 4,990. The U.S. Census Bureau has the city's population at 5,047. So I'm not hopeful that we're going to be able to convince the state aid office of that, because they have certain processes, but we're at least going to take run at it, considering that 6th Street West would be a project eligible, considering its status as a collector along with 4th Street. It could be another potential source of funding, but the way Strategy A is built, that's not till 2021, so it still leaves us some time to do that. And then kind of the big picture piece is looking at management and where we can look at not just the streets that we selected, but really a big picture perspective on our entire street system, grading those streets, prioritizing them, and then creating a finance plan to fund that. So we're not kind of cherry picking streets here and there. They'll be a little bit more systematic as far as how we're approaching street and costs. So again, we have strategy A, B, and C would be either a hybrid of what you see in A and B or something completely different. But what we're looking to get is some direction from the council to have the engineer either prepare plans and specifications for any one of these strategies so that we can try to get a project in this fall to do some mill and overlay. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we have Aaron Schmidt on the line and Chad Shell. Should the council have any questions about specific streets and their existing conditions? Thank you.
All right. Glenn, I see you first. Do you have any questions?
I kind of like the option where we coordinate 4th Street and 6th Street to intertwine with the Jonathan Carver Parkway reconstruction. So that would be what, strategy B? Is that what I'm seeing, Brent?
Strategy A. We don't have 4th Street in there, but something you could add. That'd be doing. It'd be Kirchy and High Street this year. Kirchy, High, Carver Bluffs, and Carver Creek in 2020.
Okay.
Ramsey Avenue in 21, and then 6th Street West in 21, incorporated into the Jonathan Carver Parkway Improvement Project.
That's what I was reading into. I like that strategy. We can knock out most of the streets, and it's keeping the speed down on 6th Street right now. Those were my only comments.
All right. Thanks, Glenn. Joy?
I also like strategy A. I'm really pleased to see us be able to make such an impact on multiple streets that we were presented last time, yet this year, and get those improvements made before we have to put in significant investment to really reconstruct those streets. So it's good maintenance on them. I'm also pleased to see that we've mapped in Ramsey and 6th Street for 2021, and that, just depending upon when we can get that state funding, apply some of that to 4th Street or others. So I do like the strategy A. Definitely, I like looking at increased, incorporating more money into our budget for street maintenance funding in 2021. But I do want to also encourage us to take a look at what the next ones are with that increased investment into street maintenance, as well as the potential of state funding, to make sure that we address some other roads in the neighborhood. I know we only looked at the really bad ones right now, but I know just in my development in the Bluffs, Carver Bluffs Parkway on the Jonathan Carver entrance side, I know that road isn't as old as the other side, but because I think of the traffic, it's not in great shape. So again, it'd be nice to see kind of a schedule for those streets for the future. But I support strategy A. I think it's great.
Thank you, Joy. Lori?
Can you scroll down again with strategy B? And I know we have the slides too, but I'm struggling with I have a map up too. Though strategy A, the hard thing I have is separating Ramsey Avenue. And similar to what Councilmember Knight was saying is some of the other streets within the bluffs. I happen to have been up there more recently, and I don't want to exclude some of those other ones like Ramsey Avenue, Ramsey Circle, you know, did we take a good look at Bluff Road? We've got Carver Creek Place, Woodview Circle. So when it comes to next year, if you go back up to A, I mean, I see that's a significant amount for putting Ramsey Avenue into a 2021 plan. I just don't understand enough why we're breaking it apart within that neighborhood. And then I want to make sure it eventually cover all the streets and then decide, like, do we need to stretch that out to a 2020, 21, and then 22? Do we need to stretch that out over 3 years?
I could say, Councilmember Sear, that there's not a scientific approach to how the streets were selected. I mean, part of it relates to, like, I would say on Kirchy and High, you are in a situation where you can still do a mill and overlay, where if you wait longer, it would end up being a reclamation, which is a deeper mid cut. Yep. Aaron or Chad could get into the kind of the specifics of that. I think you bring up a really good point. There are a number of streets in the Carver Bluffs neighborhood because they're, you know, primarily all the same vintage, whether it's Bluff Road or Ramsey that you can take on. So it's just a matter of getting back to my Lincoln Log analogies. You can pick out different sizes of street widths or different, you know, and form your own. And I'm certain that if we took this up to the residents, you know, everyone would prefer. I mean, I know there's folks that have been having ongoing conversations with our former public services director, Brian Skoll, at Carver Creek. You know, and so that's been one that's just been at the surface, but certainly there's other streets that shouldn't be looked at, and that's why that pavement management plan comes in, because I do acknowledge, and I think there's a little bit of a piece here where it is somewhat arbitrary how we're selecting them. We're looking at them when they all need work, but there isn't a scientific method, at least at this point, in choosing them. I would say that 6th and Ramsey and Carver Bluffs Parkway are more significant from a kind of a collector status standpoint. But that, you know, we're certainly open to making adjustments should the council want to do that.
I feel like we're playing catch up. Like we're gonna try to get all the collector, or maybe there should be a balance where moving forward, yes, every year when we can do a mill and overlay, we'll do a collector, and then maybe I don't know what they're called, ancillary or feeder or sorry, I don't have the right word, but
yep.
Not lose sight of those. Cause I was actually over by I have to look at my map again, sorry. Off Woodview Circle, Woodview Circle, there's Woodview Court, and there were a few addresses that homes that had like at the end of the driveway, like, so they don't have like the true curb gutter. It's more, Aaron Schmidt, you might have to tell me the right word for that, but we're just kind of gradually slopes. But there was 2 that had like
Mountable curb.
Yes, yep, that's the curb. But they had something almost like a ramp thing, or like to keep it from their car bottoming out. I'd never seen that, but those, and maybe there's more, or maybe that's just a personal preference. But I feel like, or that just got my attention where, wow, is this maybe a street we should be putting higher on the list?
I would offer that what you see in each of these is essentially a split of collector and just for ease of terminology, residential streets, you know.
Yep, there, okay.
Hershey and Ramsey are residential, Carver Bluffs, Carver Creek, are, and 6 are collectors. So I think we have what those streets are here.
So Hershey, though residential is a high traffic residential, or it's becoming that way. Yeah, sorry, I don't think I'm really helping you narrow this down. I'm really just like bringing up things that, so that makes it a hard decision. But I think that's one thing of, you know, balancing the collector and the residential roads. And then which ones we can still save, just because I feel like we put ourselves in a situation where we're catching up.
Yeah, I think you're, Councilmember Sear, you're 100% correct. There is a catch-up factor to this in that we've been doing crack fill and seal coat. So we could do any number of streets. You know, our street maintenance budget for several years has been in that $60,000 to $70,000 range, and we can knock out a lot of seal coating for that. But when we're talking about essentially, you know, $125,000 a street section, and it's who kind of quote unquote wins as far as getting that street maintenance first is a little critical, and that's why the pavement management plan was one of those pieces that, you know, didn't make the 2020 budget. But I think because of the conversations that were had related to street maintenance, I think the council and the community have really done their due diligence, and I think collectively we know more about the issue than we did a year ago, and so I think we're probably in a position to make some decisions.
I'd be curious too if Mr. Chad Shell has a strong recommendation. You know, without having to like go way deep into having that program or, you know, the project plan, but just kind of, you know, just him and his team are, you know, feet on the ground. You know, I would lean heavily on what his recommendation is.
Ed, do you want to jump in?
Absolutely. I agree that we are playing catch up. For me, seeing a good balance of residential and collector roads being repaired in the next year or two, that would be my goal. I'm looking more as age of pavement and how many vehicles, such as collectors, are going over the roads. That would be my recommendation.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Are you good, Lori?
Yes.
All right. Christy?
Thanks. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. So strategy A, this isn't good or bad, but it seems really aggressive, like we are really going after this. So I'm curious if you think that there's if there's a good reason to wait, because we're looking at strategy B also, which we start to look at that state aid funding. I don't want us to miss out on funding that we could be using for some of these roads. Do we think that that is any type of factor? Brent, maybe you want to comment on this a little bit, but if we're looking at state funding to begin in 2022, and we're just looking for that for 4th Street, but I don't see that in strategy A. Did I miss something?
No, I think you bring up a good point, Councilmember Mock, and I think that's the benefit of for at least now leaving 6th Street out of 2020 is that could be a street that could use state aid funds. We're likely going to be able to get them in 2022, so it's a matter of, you know, are you able to withstand 6th Street in its current condition for 2 more years? I would say your comments on kind of that big push are well received. My primary anxiety point, if that's the right terminology, is that understanding the condition of the roads in Carver Bluffs, and then I look at, you know, Mount Hope Road and, you know, the development over where Abbey Lane is, and those streets, because of the dollars that we're talking about, it's gonna be real easy to get behind. And so just from a kind of a budget preservation standpoint, you're right in viewing that as like, this is a strategy at least to take a big step forward. Is that the right strategy? I think there's different schools of thought on that. So, and that's what we're trying to get from the council is there are certainly less aggressive strategies that we could employ and still be successful. This is just an option to be a little bit more aggressive with it.
So for the 6th Street project, can you remind me, I know we talked about this before, we're going to have a lot of area closed down with JCP being under construction. What are we doing to our traffic flows if 6th Street goes down at the same time?
From Dan's comments at the last meeting, my understanding was it'd be negligible considering the whole project, that it's the mill and overlay. Aaron, I might need to jump in, but mill and overlay is typically done in like a day or two. Is that correct, Aaron?
Yep, that's right, Brent. I mean, to mill 6th Street, that's about a day activity in all actuality, and then to do the overlay itself is probably another day. I think what Dan alluded to last time, with the drainage improvements, that's going to take a little bit more time just because there's maybe some concrete work we have to do down there at the bottom of the hill. So I think he said maybe that was a couple weeks worth of work, but there's going to be a time when it'll fit into that project, I think, just based on the staging. So I think it'll work out nicely.
I mean, you could probably push it toward the back end of the project, Councilmember Mock, so that Carver Parkway is essentially open, and then when they do the final lift on JCP, that's when they do the mill and overlay work on 6th Street. So it's not done at the heart of construction.
So to get the 320,000 out of the state, or an additional to the money that we're going to be receiving for the JCP improvements, are we comfortable with adding that money to that? Do we feel comfortable adding that amount of debt to that project?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, Brent, if that's
in the grand scheme,
that money that
I don't see it's a kind of an opinion-based answer, because I think different people would have different responses. I think it's a relatively small number comparatively to the overall cost of the project, but at the end of the day, it's 320,000, and so it's either from the JCP bonding authority. You could wait and say, well, we're gonna use, once it's closed, we're gonna use the tower money to complete that. You could wait for state aid. I mean, there really is a whole plethora of choices.
Was there a reason that we didn't have the 2022 state funding line on strategy A?
I didn't show it. I mean, I copied and pasted from the original one to denote it. But because we're not planning out a 22 project, I felt like this was a hard enough exercise just to kind of plan for this year, next year, knowing what the funding was. I kind of compacted it down a little bit, because it really is a maze of options when you think about all the streets we have and the revenue streams and the choices that are in front of us. So, and if the council just wants to say, an option just to say what you want to do this year, and you want to spend more time thinking about what next year looks like, because the $120,000 in this strategy, but we're only just starting putting together the 2021 budget, so I really have no idea what type of impact that has. Look at the budget in totality, because we don't have department head submitted budgets, and so you might be in a position where you don't want to spend that kind of money. I think in general you want to make a bigger investment, or at least that's what I've heard from the council. But if that number is 120 or 90 or 160? That remains to be seen. Probably the biggest question is do you want to do a project this year, and where do you want to do it, and where do you want to get those funds from? If you feel comfortable making more choices, certainly could, but they're not. You don't need to make those right now. If you want a project done in 2020, you need to get Aaron, Dan, and Bolton and Mink going on putting together documents to try to get that done this fall.
One more comment, I guess. Lori, you were talking about Ramsey Avenue, and that one just sort of, to me, that one, I'm not sure, it just seems a little like thrown in there. I'm not saying it doesn't need work, but we have Hershey and High, and then we start with the Bluffs and Carver Creek. Does it make more sense to do those road projects in the Bluffs in the same year rather than splitting them back and forth? Because
it's a good point. This section of Ramsey, though, however, isn't close to the section of Carver Bluffs Parkway and Carver Creek that we're looking at. This section of Ramsey is, I'd say, on the Jonathan Carver Parkway side, where the other sections are close to Bluff Park. They're not up the hill.
Okay. That helps. It seemed a little disjointed, so I couldn't quite figure out why Ramsey was the next year. Okay, I think that's all I have right now.
All right, so.
Can I ask one more question of Brent?
Yep, go ahead.
Is Carver Bluffs Parkway from Jonathan Carver to 40, is that considered a collector at all? Does it not make it? I can't remember.
Jonathan Carver Parkway from, say that again?
Carver Bluffs Parkway.
Carver Bluffs.
From Jonathan Carver Parkway to County Road 40. I guess I'm asking which sections of that qualify for the state funding?
Yeah,
for the state aid, yes.
And Aaron's
that would really come down to Joy designating the routes that we want to put on our system. At some point, you just run out of the amount of miles you can put on the system, so you can only have 20%. So
okay,
it would technically qualify in that it begins and ends at a county road or a county state aid highway. So you could look at that, but I think the other ones may,
they'll be higher traffic.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
But it could work. Yep.
Okay.
Look at. Sure.
Okay, I didn't realize the percentage allocation. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, the notes that I have jotted down, I like strategy A. I like that we're condensing this. I think that we are finding ourselves in a really good position and that we have a very healthy special capital fund that we can draw the financing from this. With that, and I said it 2 weeks ago and I want to say it again, I realize that this is the tip of the iceberg. And Lori, you mentioned playing catch up. We're absolutely playing catch up on this. And this does not complete the issue. Once we finish these areas, which have been designated by our city engineers and other city staff as kind of the highest need areas in our community, there's going to be a bunch of other options. We've talked about all of the roads that are in the Bluffs. I'm sure River Oaks is aging and getting up there and is due. I bet that the Skyview area is probably getting up there. So this is something that we are in reality going to need to keep doing. Even though, and Brent kind of alluded this, I think Christine answering some of your questions, I want to make sure that we really demonstrate a commitment in the 2021 budget to putting money towards these projects. So even if we put $100,000 to it, all of these are six-figure projects, and there's always going to be something that needs to be done to maintain this and to keep after these, because our streets are aging, and this could potentially be a 20-year project that we could put together, or 20-year guidelines for 20 years worth of work. At that point, potentially Copper Hills and some of the newer developments are going to need help and need some additional street reconstruction. Let's see. I think that's it for my notes. Again, I would go with strategy A. I think I like that it's condensed. I don't have an issue with bonding for the work on 6th Street along with the JCP project, because we're not going to have the money unless we really, really take a hard look at budgeting and budget for that next year. But I don't think we're there as a council, but going ahead with strategy A as outlined. So that is it from me. Does anybody else have any comments, additional comments, questions? Glenn, I see your hand.
Yeah, am I live?
You are.
Okay, just a little historical perspective. The original idea with the previous councils was to get all of the downtown streets up to speed before we started getting into all the maintenance that we knew was going to be coming down for later councils. And so doing all the capital projects that we did downtown to get those up to speed was planned, and I liked strategy A. When I was looking at strategy B also, it also says that 6th Street and Kirchian Highway in 2021. But I like A because it knocks out, it knocks out more streets in the immediate future. And that way we can kind of plan a little bit more for what we're doing with 6th Street, and maybe there'll be some financing for 6th Street, not just in 2022, potentially. There might be some other revenue streams in 2021. So I like strategy A, and that's kind of where I was at with it after re-looking at it. But just for the historical perspective, we knew that, all the other streets that we've put into town the last number of years, they're all going to need upkeep and maintenance as well. And so knocking out as many of them as we possibly can with the funds that we have available now is a big plus.
Right. In addition to what Glenn said, we knew that the 2019 project was kind of the last of that really, for the time being, really hefty, like full on big time construction project. So thank you, Glenn, for the historical knowledge and perspective of like, this is where we are now with the need to maintain what we've got. So thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Just one other item, and I might need the city attorney to help me with this, but we haven't brought this idea fully forward, but it's certainly available. But it's somewhat complex in that. So the mill and overlay is typically referred to as maintenance, so you wouldn't especially assess that. There is a small distinction between a reclamation, which would be considered a new pavement section by some. And so you could potentially be in a position where you could attempt to specially assess property owners just based on where we've been. Didn't feel like that was going to be something that the council would like, but I certainly want to bring that up. I don't know if the city attorney could add any context to that might help provide some additional information to the council.
Before he does, Brent, if I can interrupt, the only thing that we're talking about reclamation is Ramsey at this point. Am I remembering that correctly or no?
Aaron, do you want to help me with that? It's Ramsey.
Yeah, it's Ramsey and Carver Creek Circle.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Larry?
If you're going to reclaim a street, it'll fall within the definition of allowable improvements under Chapter 429. It's the basic standard of what is a requisite improvement in the value of the property commensurate with the cost of what you'd assess. You have to go through that process. The issue, if you're going to do that, is it adds a significant time component to all of this, because under 429, you have to first do a feasibility study, you have to have the hearing on the improvement, you have to order the improvement, you have to go through the entire process. So it's not that you can't do it, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but if you're looking at doing that for this year, it's going to be tough.
And there's just there's a level of anxiety that exists, or maybe call it politics with a lowercase p, where if a neighborhood is in a position to get a mill and overlay project, and for whatever reason it doesn't happen at a point where it's feasible and it switches over to reclamation, you're undoubtedly going to have a neighborhood that says, well, you did this project, this neighborhood in a mill and overlay, they paid nothing other than their property taxes, and then you waited for us, and now we're paying a special assessment on reclamation. So there's to use a phrase I use a lot, there's a lot of, is the juice worth the squeeze on that, on some of the conversations. So I'm nothing if I'm not a man with a lot of cliches.
And Lincoln logs.
That a cliche? I guess I don't have an appetite for looking at special assessments for these.
I am in agreement with Christy. I think that John Q. Public resident who lives on Carver Creek Circle is going to have a hard time distinguishing the difference between a reclamation and a mill and overlay. And I think that that's going to be a nasty hair to split if we start assessing for this.
I do have one more question.
Go ahead.
So we're already, June 15, and we're looking at projects for 2020. Are we going to have time to fit these in?
That's why we have to decide tonight.
Right, but I know how the construction business goes, and are we going to be okay to actually push these through for this year?
I know for certain that Critchie and High can get done because you already have a bid price for that. So it's just a matter of having that accepted. I defer to Aaron Schmidt on a timeline as it relates to Carver Bluffs and Carver Creek.
I don't foresee an issue with us preparing plans and specs and getting a bid and constructed this year, Christine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any additional questions?
No, I support this just because this, same with what Mayor Johnson said and Councilmember Mock, where I'm not comfortable with having to do an assessment. So I'd rather get going, let's move forward, be good stewards of what we have, let's take care of what we have so that we can do that less expensive step of that mill and overlay. So I would like to move forward with this, and I might need some coaching again on the correct terminology, but I would like to make a motion to approve what's being presented as Strategy A.
That's probably good enough. We have
I'll
a motion
second
by
that.
Councilmember Sayer and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion?
I might need some more coaching here on this today. I have a comment in the future, things like this, when we see the name of the project, as the year, anyways, if you could add a column that said if it was mill and overlay or if it was that other one, the reclamation. So in future, things like this, I would like to have that outlined. So that was my comment.
Thank you. Good.
All right, any other further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Merrick, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Henry.
Glenn Henry, aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer.
I'm Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Hi, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes. Thank you all. Moving on, 9.3, website redesign. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
I'm gonna take you to the City of Carver website. It was last reconstructed in 2011. The city had previously used what's called Gov Office, which was kind of the original website design that the League of Minnesota Cities partnered with a number of cities when kind of websites were first kind of getting off the ground. So the city probably constructed that website, I'm guessing sometime in the early 2000s or late 90s. And then in 2011, the late and former Mayor Oskerdijk really took a leadership role in switching the city over to this, what you see is a WordPress website software platform, which is typically used by small businesses as kind of build your own website. And so we've been operating from this platform since 2011. For the last 9 years, the city has used that. However, as you can imagine, with technology changes over the last 9 years, things related to navigation tools, overall website experience, and kind of a really big piece for Vicki and Brenda Good and other team members that use it is this kind of ease of use. It's very clunky to use WordPress, considering the amount of documents that we post. And another piece that's come up in the last several years is website accessibility. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in that. I know that we're struggling probably right now in meeting what would be considered an accessible test as it relates to our website. If the council has questions specific to that, I'm guessing the city attorney might be able to share a few comments on that. But overall, having this redesign would meet that need as well as just frankly the enhanced use related to COVID-19 and then the feedback that the city received in the 2020 community survey, as well as the council identifying it within their strategic plan. And I'll just jump to Laconia's site. They use Civic Plus. There's examples with the city of Burnsville, Chanhassen, Victoria. And so we center around Civic Plus just because of their experience with other cities. We had a webinar with them and the ease of use of that platform. Vicki and Brenda Good participated in, and so at your last meeting, the council asked that this be expedited. So the overall cost of the project for 2020 would be $22,482.24. Annual servicing fee of $5,021, which was started one. Proposed to take that out of the special capital fund, which currently has a balance of just over $357,000. We did have the agreement reviewed by the city attorney's office, and we are working on a few little bits that one of Larry's associates is helping me out with. So if the council is so inclined, you can motion to accept the proposal subject to the contract approval by the city attorney for the price as indicated. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Oh, go ahead, Christy. I can't see on my view right now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was like waiting.
Sorry.
Brent, when you say we have like the service contract, or did you say $5,000 a year?
Correct. So it's basically the storage and placement on their servers, and then the customer service aspect or servicing of the account is the annual fee.
Okay, so let's say our folks had some questions as they were doing something. Does that include support if they were to call in somewhere? It does. Okay, that's all I have for questions.
All right, go ahead, Joy.
Is there an existing service fee that we're paying for WordPress? An annual servicing cost?
No, it's independent. So we're our own kind of customer service.
Got it.
I'm not sure if Vicki or Brenda have reached out to like the WordPress folks, but my speculation would be is that we've just tried to figure that out on our own because it's not a.
Vicki's nodding.
Yeah,
yes.
It's not like
okay.
They provide the software, but they don't they don't tell you really how to use it. There's a lot of forums on how to use different aspects of WordPress. You know, the experienced users out there, but it's not the same business model as Civic Plus would be, which is a kind of a silver lining, especially for Vicky and Brenda Good, to have as it relates to using the new software platform.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Lori or Glenn, I don't see any hands. No. Brent?
I do want to share, like, one of the pieces that we'd like to do is have a kickoff for this project and include the council to get, and Councilmember McKnight had mentioned this as an idea, to get kind of some to-dos or goals related to this project. And I really would like to have the council participate in kind of the broad strokes of the design, what it looks like, what pictures that we kind of want to invoke. And I think from what I understand from Civic Plus, they're willing to facilitate that discussion. So perhaps something we can do in a work session and kind of get down how the council wants to have this look, because this is essentially our virtual front door of City Hall. And so I'd like to have the council's input before we just create something and bring it to you.
I like that idea. Boy, back in a world where we were able to sit in the Rapids room and have a meeting, I was in on the proposal by Civic Plus with Vicky and Brenda, and I think that this is a great company. I think that this is the way to go. I like that all of their products can be customized and that it doesn't look cookie cutter, that Burnsville's website doesn't look like Victoria's website, doesn't look like Waconia's website. So I really like this. Just a few things, and perhaps maybe more for the kickoff meeting, but you've heard me say it before. I think it's really important that we do whatever we can on kind of the front end to make sure that that search function is robust and that we're tagging things the right way so that they can come up, so that when residents or members of the council are looking for information to share with our constituents, we can find it, because that has been my biggest heartburn and struggles with the existing site, is that I can't find a darn thing, and it concerns me that if I can't find it when I know what I'm looking for, folks who don't know what they're looking for are going to really struggle. And I think it might be fun too, Brent, when we're talking about pictures, to maybe even do like a photo contest or kind of get that going, have some kind of social media, submit your pictures here so that we can have some really fun resident submitted pictures to go through and have just a really neat library to keep working on and rotating through the site. So with that, I will make an motion to accept the proposal from Civic Plus for a redesign of the City of Carver's website for $22,482.24, authorizing payment to be made from a special capital fund subject to the city attorney's feedback on the contract. A second?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
We're all
Beat you
seconding.
to it.
Okay, I'll give that to Joy in a photo finish. So a motion from Mayor Johnson and a second from Councilmember McKnight. Mr. Merritt, can you run us through a roll call, please?
Councilmember Henry?
I have a couple comments. May I?
Oh, sure.
As far as getting together, we're gonna do the picture sessions and stuff and figuring out in a work session, correct?
Right.
And do we have a timing on that relatively soon?
We will get it as soon as possible, but I can't give you a date at this point.
Okay, well, the reason I say that is, the new website, I mean, with everybody using the social media like they are, and through our survey, found out that everybody wants to go to the website, making it, like Courtney commented, the search function, making that really simple for people to use, having a very simple website, and yet loaded with information and everything, the sooner we can get that up and running, the better. But with that, I will say aye, Glenn Henry, for the motion.
Councilmember
Aye.
Mock,
Oh, sorry. Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
all right, Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. All right, thank you all. All right, up next, the COVID-19 phasing plan. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is something that you've seen in a different, or essentially the same form when we presented the entire phasing plan. Now we're recommending the council that we move into phase 2, and so I'll just go over some of the key points. One, moving back council and commission meetings to the council chambers. We still want to try to keep the video conferencing tool, but I have been in a lot of conversation with some colleagues around the metro of how best to do that. It's with Granicus, with people live in the chambers and then people on the Zoom call. I think it was interesting to have Sheriff Cameroon in trying to figure out how to kind of get all these pieces of media and technology to kind of blend together. We're going to have to spend some time figuring out how to best make that work. But really want to try to keep that open because I believe folks are really on their own journey as it relates to how comfortable they feel in certain settings for COVID-19, whether that's council staff or residents. And so keeping that ability to remote in for residents, I think, is critical. At some point when the city goes off its emergency, takes away its temporary emergency resolution, we'd fall under the protocol of regular meetings. And I think Mayor Johnson and Councilmember McKnight kind of remember all the enhanced protocols there are related to remote participating in the meeting remotely. And so we're gonna work with the league to see how long we can stay in that. I don't know if the city attorney has any comments related to that.
My basic comment is, as long as the governor keeps extending the order, I think the city can keep, without any risk, extending its emergency order. Obviously, the governor's extended his order into next month, and based on what he said, he looks at extending it beyond that. So I think you have a fair amount of flexibility. If at some point in time the governor terminates the emergency order and the city has some inclination to continue it, I'd like to be involved in that discussion because I probably have some thoughts on that.
I would also add that I think people are looking at remote meetings differently. I think 2019 people thought of that as something from the future, and now I think everyone is increasingly and immensely more comfortable with the idea of video conferencing. So I wouldn't be surprised if the legislature takes a look at their existing requirements for that and alters them. Moving on, we go back to our regular council meeting schedule. So work sessions at 5:30, regular meeting at 7. We just hold both meetings in the council chambers so we can maintain social distancing. So we'd ask all our commissions to meet in there as well. I think some of the commissions, I think maybe the HPC has met in the Rapids room, and so we'd want them to the council chambers. Probably one of the biggest pieces is we'd be opening up the City Hall service counter effective tomorrow with our social distancing and public health strategies. So I know the mayor probably noticed, but for those of you that haven't been in City Hall, we have hand sanitizing stations throughout the building, some placards involving how to stop the spread of the germ. So we're in good shape here as it relates to following best practices. We'd open field reservations for both picnic shelters and fields with current regulations limiting outdoor gatherings to 25. We were able to partner or use of an acknowledgement form that the city of Delano came up with. We didn't want to get into the position where we were having people share COVID-19 response plans and then having Vicki and her team try to go through 20-page documents. And so we wanted that acknowledgement form to be a living document where we go through and have them acknowledge that they're going to follow the governor's existing orders, since those are subject to change on a fairly regular basis. The one piece that is new, and I'd like to get some feedback from the council on, is we're still not opening indoor facilities. Right now, that's still at 10 people for events. And so, and I put in your memo the excerpt from the governor's latest executive order related to indoor social gatherings. We're feeling like 25 is probably the right number so that we don't have to closely monitor that, but that's more of an arbitrary point. And so if you have a different feeling on that, feel free to share. And then finally, we're still going to encourage staff to work remotely, but we're not going to discourage if someone wants to work and transition to normal on-site hours. That'll be available depending upon the person's position and responsibilities within the city. The last thing attached to this memo is the city's COVID-19 preparedness plan. One of the functions of the governor's order required each city to prepare a preparedness plan, and so it's a fairly template, or it's based on a template provided by the state, but also sections from what we've already approved through different processes and approvals that the council has had. We put our phasing plan in there, best practices related to what the CDC, Public Health are recommending, and then just all the different things that we're doing related to using a stylus pen to operate the copier and having the sanitation stations. So we'll be going through a process of, once the council adopts it, I'll be running through the agreement with department heads tomorrow, and then they'll be running through it with their teams later on in the week, just so that we can be all on the same page and everyone has the same level of comfort and information as it relates to the pandemic. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the council.
Questions, comments? Go ahead, Christy.
Okay, I didn't know if you could see me or not.
I can see you now. It's just when when somebody shares their screen and everybody's in just one column on the right-hand side.
Okay. So Brent, if we're considering opening our facilities, fields, picnic shelters, or rentals, what are we doing for restroom facilities if we're going to be opening like that?
So our last action closed those for the year, so we're maintaining the satellites. So our plan is to keep the public restrooms and the parks closed, the permanent ones, and maintain the satellites. And I'd probably ask Chad to jump in if we're feeling like those are being used to the point where we need to add additional. There's an appeal there as it relates to not having to clean sinks and fixtures in the permanent bathroom setting. So that's more of an approach than an absolute at this point.
Okay, so help me understand, if we are using, I'll just say, a portable restroom. I don't want to use the company name. So if we're using a portable restroom and you have hand sanitizer in there, well, how is this safer to us than having people go in and actually wash their hands? They're both bathrooms. One you actually wash, one you don't. This is a tough one for me to understand why we're paying money to rent portable restrooms when we have them.
Yeah, it's probably a feeling that but there's probably the difference between the two is probably marginal. So, it's an approach. So if the council didn't want to do portable restrooms, we'd be open to that. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, say that there's
on infectious diseases from the bathrooms, but
yeah. I was talking. No. So yeah, I defer to Chad if he has any specific insight on that. I'm not sure what kind of perspective his team is cleaning or would be cleaning the restrooms.
Sure. How are the portable restrooms being cleaned then? I'm just throwing this out as discussion because like I said, it's a hard one for me to understand if we have someone who's actually going in and cleaning the restrooms at the park, but we have a portable restroom there that's not being cleaned technically at all. I don't know how that is supposed to be doing us any
Yeah, I believe the service provider cleans those. I'm not sure on the frequency. Chad, can you jump in on this topic for us?
It's usually once a week. Some of the busier locations are twice a week where they're wiped down and sanitized.
By the company.
Correct. Yes.
And then how often would our staff normally go in to check bathrooms? Daily during the week?
That would be daily, yes.
I don't know, does council, the rest of the council have any comments for what we do with the restrooms at this point?
I have one question and then a comment.
Go ahead, Lori.
We have running water in the bathrooms, right? Like, is it hot water?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with using just the facilities we have. Let people make their own choice on if they want to use them or not, and not have us spend money on a vendor to drop them off, we rent them, whatever the cleaning contract is. So it's, I just don't, I think we're fine providing the service of indoor plumbing and hot water. You know, we'll do our best to have soap when we can. We can't always control that, you know, but otherwise people can just use their own choice, but I don't like the idea of spending extra money.
And if I'm not mistaken, aren't these part of, we would have the porta potties there anyway?
Correct. In the past, we've had the additional satellite restrooms in conjunction with the regular shelter restrooms.
I thought that was just one at, and I'm sorry, is that at all the parks? Because I thought there was just an extra one that was at community, but not Lions. Bluff has its own bathrooms, but we supplied them at Riverside.
Yeah, there's additional porta potties. Like we wouldn't typically have a portable toilet at Lions Park. I know there was at least one at community, but I think there's probably 2 additional at community. So there's definitely more than what we typically have. And, you know, some parks we don't have any. I mean, the shelters that we have with bathrooms are Lions Park, Bluff Park, and Community Park.
I guess for me, I'm all for using the restrooms that we have, besides providing the ones where we would typically have them, where Riverside we would have one because there isn't a facility, and then Community Park, because it's such a large park and spread out, there was always one there. Other than that, to me, use the restrooms that we have.
Larry, is there any liability issue with if we have the satellite, the porta potties, that there's a lack of, from a COVID front issue liability?
In terms of what, specifically cleanliness?
Yeah, or
Contamination?
risk of disease, yeah.
You know, I don't know what your arrangement is, but the traditional porta potty arrangement involves not only obtaining the facility, you pay the company to come in weekly or bi-weekly to clean and sanitize. You're making a value decision, an appropriate business risk decision. I can't tell you there won't be a claim, but it's a reasonable decision the council can make.
And we'd probably take the CDC posters that we have in City Hall and laminate them and put them on the bathroom doors just to do our due diligence. But I think it's just frankly an approach. We had some, you know, I think that's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. I mean, we have facilities to use, so I think that's a reasonable argument to make.
Can we reopen up the bathrooms without turning on the bubblers? That was for you, Brent, or the water fountain at Lions and Community? Maybe that's a question for you, Chad.
Yes, we can. We
Okay.
can keep the water fountains off.
Okay. Okay, because I think those need to stay off.
Yep, I agree.
Good suggestion, Mayor Johnson. And the bubbler comment sounded very
Wisconsin.
It's very Milwaukee.
Very Milwaukee, yes. I want to make a comment. If we're opening our park facilities, it just makes sense to open the bathrooms. I mean, if we're going to allow rentals and things like that, it makes sense to open the bathrooms. So I'm comfortable with that too.
Thank you, everyone, for entertaining my talk about restrooms tonight.
It's a lot of potty
Did we
talk.
make a motion a long time ago?
No.
Probably not.
But you could and save us from all of this. Any other questions about the broader COVID-19 phasing plan? And if not, I'd entertain a motion to move to phase 2 of the COVID-19 phasing plan.
I would like to make a motion to move to phase 2 of the COVID-19 phasing plan.
Motion by Councilmember Mock.
I'll second it.
And a second by Councilmember Henry. Any further discussion? Mr. Merrick? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Merrick.
Councilmember Mott, could you amend that to include opening the park shelter bathrooms?
I sure can. So I would like to make a motion to move to phase 2 of the COVID-19 phasing plan, including opening the park shelter restrooms.
And I will amend my second to the motion.
Okay, so we continue to have a motion by Councilmember Mock and a second by Councilmember Henry. Any further discussion on the amended motion? All right, Mr. Mayor, can you run us through a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
and Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, it looks like we also need a motion to adopt the COVID-19 preparedness plan.
I can make the motion to adopt the COVID-19 preparedness plan also.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Mock and a second by Councilmember Henry, right? Okay.
Yes.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, Mr. Mayor, can you do another roll call vote, please?
Sure. Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes. Moving on to communications. Mr. Henry, you want to go first?
Sure. I filled in for Councilmember Mock at the Heritage Preservation Committee, and we discussed a door and a window at 200 3rd Street, and they approved the door, no problem. They approved the window, just not the basement window that was presented, and they're discussing options, but they are going with the concept, so it doesn't have to come back to the committee. It's going to be handled with the building official. What else? Not too much else is going on. Planning Commission, I believe, is canceled this month as well, so that's what I got.
All right, Joy?
Sure. Councilmember Mock and Brent and I attended the fire board meeting for the townships. And a couple things I wanted to pass along. We did talk about some budget items, which I think we've touched on in the city council, including the self-contained breathing apparatus that are all due to be replaced in 2025, and they're starting to put money away now for it, and also looking at some grants they need to help fund that, as well as radios that are failing at a rapid rate. And so those were two budget items I think we'll be hearing a little bit more about as we go through our 2021 budget. And then an update on the new fire engine is supposed to be in the fire station around the week of July 13th. So they're super excited about that. They'll be doing some training for several weeks and then probably put it into service mid-August. That's about it that I had from those.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Brent.
So did you go around the horn yet? Sorry
No.
to interrupt. Okay,
No,
sorry.
you are interrupting.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Lori?
No updates at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Christy?
All right. Well, first, I do want to say thank you to Glenn for filling in for me at the HBC. I had a work commitment that I needed to take care of. So thanks, Glenn. And then as Jordan was saying, that we had the Township Fire Board meeting. We did hear some feedback. Thank you, Joy, for running through the agenda for what we went over. But feedback from the township, they were very happy to hear that the fire department was budgeting year by year, so that when they got to 2025, that they were going to be able to have the money available, whether they got grants or not. So they were really impressed that they were on that. I wanted to mention Steamboat Days. So I'm the chair of Steamboat Days and that committee right now. I know we've been getting a few questions about whether we or not we're going to be hosting Steamboat Days this year. You know, fairs, obviously the state fair is canceled, we know that, so that kind of kicked off when the decisions we would make. The state fair obviously is a massive endeavor. They cannot wait a long time before canceling that. For Steamboat Days, we have, most of our entertainment has a 30-day clause in our contracts. So I have put the dart on the dartboard for August 1st. That's when we'll look to start making that final decision. If for some reason, you know, the governor's saying, you know, August 3rd, I'm going to make some big announcement, obviously we can wait till August 3rd. But right around that August 1 mark is when we'll be looking at making a final decision. Obviously, a lot of that is going to be coming down to what the governor states for how many people can gather in one place at one time. So if we do get questions, we're just hanging tight for right now and seeing what happens. And then I also am just going to put this bug out there right away too, that if it does happen, it may look very different this year. And it may look different for a number of reasons. One, there may be some guidelines from the state that we have to follow or may come into play that we aren't even aware of yet. Two, the committee has lost basically 3 months of time together and working on this. So it may look a little bit different. We don't know yet. In August 1st-ish, will tell us more. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Hi, Lori.
Go ahead,
I
Lori.
always set the date as the weekend after Labor Day, but can you remind us and anyone watching what the dates are for Steamboat Days?
Sure. Thank you for asking me that. No, it's September 11th through 13th. So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday after Labor Day.
Christy, my only question, I think that you know, your target of August 1st might be, or even saying early August might be something good to share on social media. Are you planning on pushing that out on Steamboat Days social media channels?
I am. So that will be coming up this week. I meant to get it done this weekend. It just didn't happen. So we're hopefully early this week here now. We'll get that out. I also am rolling that into what we ask for when we ask for like food vendors and things. So in our contracts that we created, we didn't necessarily have this clause of if we're canceling, you're going to get all your money back. So we didn't really think that 16 days is this year, the way it is. So we're going to make sure that clause, we have to review our contracts really quick just to make sure that that's in there. And then part of that social media push is going to say, hey, if you're a vendor, you want to be in the marketplace, you're a food vendor, if you want to sign up now, great. We are more than happy to. If we have to cancel it because of the pandemic, you will get all of your money back from us. So we just want to make sure that people are comfortable knowing that if they sign up, that they're not going to be at a loss.
That sounds really smart and getting your ducks in a row. Thank you.
And I see Larry Harris over here. Did you have something, Larry?
Not.
Okay.
Is that it, Christy?
That's it, unless anybody else has any Steamboat Days questions for me. Okay.
All right. From me, I had told you guys at our last meeting that I was going to present in front of the Carver County Board about the levee improvement project that took place the following day on June 2nd. Since then, Brent and I have had follow-up meetings with Commissioner Maluchnik as well as Dave Pokorny. Dave, you may or may not know, was the city administrator in Chaska when they went through their levee project. So he did a really terrific job and took all the time that Brent and I needed in going through the nuts and bolts of that project. That was one of the suggestions from the county commissioners, was that we connect with that in hopes that we could learn how to finance our project through the same way that the city of Chaska did. We kind of knew this going into it, but unfortunately that was through a TIF district, and that type of TIF district is no longer allowed. Am I capturing that correctly, Brent? Okay. Carver Cleanup Day was this past Saturday. It's always something that is really well received by folks in the city of Carver and those who don't live here but enjoy junk. So that brought lots of good people watching on Friday night, but also some really good kind of closing the loop on, I think, all the purging that everybody has been doing during this extended period of staying at home. Congratulations to our night deputy, Deputy Prossert, who he and his wife welcomed a new addition into the world within the last week, so that's super exciting, and it seems like there's a little bit of a mini baby boom in the city of Carver. Also had the Regional Council of Mayors meeting last week, and then finally, I just wanted to follow up on kind of the statement that I made at the last meeting, where I'd mentioned that I was going to use my position as mayor to advocate for justice and respect in our community. In the past few days, some really icky, awful incidents have been brought to my attention. Separate from that, and kind of wheels that I already had turning, but I'm going to be working with Brent to hopefully bring a proposal and more information that we can share at a future meeting. Is I would like to see folks at the city go through the GARE training, and GARE is the Government Alliance for Race and Equity. Last summer, the department heads and I went through this training. It's terrific. Through the Community Leaders Group. And the Community Leaders Group, if you guys remember, is folks from the school district, and then mayors and city managers or city administrators, the Carver County Board, the Sheriff's Department. We went through that. So just about everybody. Brent was there, Vicki was there, Aaron was there. I think there were 4 or 5 of us from the city of Carver. I was there. It was a really great training. I would like to see us train, give commissioners the opportunity to go through this training, have more staff go through it. I'd love to see the fire department go through it, and just really kind of broaden the scope. So just to give you a little bit of an idea about what I'm talking about, kind of the synopsis of this is the GARE training is geared towards normalizing conversations about race, understanding terminology, understanding the history of race, and why race matters. It also provides local governments with the tools and skills to build race equity into their processes and policies. So that's it from me, but just wanted to give you a heads up on something that'll be coming down the pipeline. Mr. Merrick?
I just wanted to connect with the council on the ETV ordinance. It's something that the city attorney and I are working on, but I'm not certain that we have clear expectations of what the council is looking for. So I just wanted to verify that, because there's a number of paths. Like there's a path that kind of started as it relates to this updating definitions, but just from conversations I've had with council members, I think there's probably a conversation just evolving around, should you be able to ride ATVs and UTVs in city limits? And I just wanted to, each of those has a different type of process or way that Larry might explain the process. And I just wanted to make sure that we'll match up and provide you with the materials that you'll need at your next meeting. If I could get some feedback on that. Are you wanting to have an update? Are you wanting to just update definitions, or are you wanting to have a discussion about permitting those vehicles on city streets?
I would like to have a discussion about permitting some, whatever it looks like, vehicles on the street, particularly UTVs. But I would like to be able to have that discussion rather than just a definition change. Because right now, I believe Glenn, right before the meeting started, asked the question of Larry that they are technically not
illegal now.
Oh, I'm I'm sorry, they're technically not allowed on city streets at this time, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay. So I would prefer to have a discussion about UTVs in particular, and the rest of the list at our next meeting.
I'm in the same, like, thought process, or like this early in it, where I'd like to have more discussion about it. I'd also like to be able to add, the snowmobile and the, golf cart, just more so, I feel like there's a lot of gray area right now with people that I've talked to, assumptions, so just that we can get it clarified and then have it documented however it needs to be, and then we don't need to revisit this for a while. But I think we kind of need to catch up with the times, update things, but let's have that discussion, and then even have verbiage so that we can answer questions as they come up, so that we don't have any gray area for whether it be an ATV, UTV, snowmobile, golf cart, and I might be missing something, so like that to be part of the discussion.
I, at the minimum, would like to update the definition, because it was glaringly obvious how almost embarrassingly out of date our terminology is because of the age of the ordinance, and it seems like a good time to have this discussion of if we should allow them or disallow them in the city. So for me, it's a yes to both.
Yeah, I'd agree. One other thing that's difficult for me to understand is we have, I believe as I understood it, we have a definition, but also if the vehicle is licensed, they can be on the city streets. I think whether they meet a specific definition or not, and I guess I'm super confused. I don't know enough about these vehicles to know if a lot of them are licensed, and if that just automatically gives them, that's approved for use in the city, despite whatever a definition between an ATV and a UTV might be. If they're licensed, they're in. I would like that clarified for me as we go through the definitions.
What I'm hearing is, I think our intent was to bring forward an ordinance, but there's usually a problem with like design building an ordinance where you're just changing language. I think it would be better to have like a column of the vehicles we're looking to discuss regulating. It's half a dozen, and then say to what extent you want them regulated, and then that's kind of the seeds that Larry uses to kind of build an ordinance. But to put an ordinance together without that type of feedback is probably not going to be a productive use of Larry's time.
The other thing I'd point out, Mr. Merrick, is that council asked a lot of questions at the last meeting, most of which I'll be in a position to answer in the form of a memo. What kind of signals can you use? How are UTVs regulated differently than ATVs under state statute? Are there state statutes that prevail? What can get licensed? The council's going to want all of that information, and I'll have a memo to you detailing all of that.
But you'll include then, I heard golf carts and snowmobiles as well.
Well, I think golf carts and snowmobiles are more, they don't get licensed, at least not licensed the same way. Those are kind of like overriding policy decisions the council has in terms of what you are or not going to allow. You have to tell me how to craft the ordinance. ATVs and UTVs are somewhat differently because they operate a little more like vehicles, and they kind of get used a little more like motor vehicles. So it's a whole panoply of policy decisions that we have to make. The golf cart one's probably the easiest because you don't have anybody and nobody's raising the issue, and you don't have a golf course. But I think the main push and the main issues are going to be ATVs, UTVs, and snowmobiles.
I have been asked about golf carts. My knowledge, the only thing that's allowed on the city's, on at least from 6th Street down to Casey's and up to Jonathan Carver Parkway is snowmobiles in the winter just to get there, whatever they need, gas primarily, and then out. Everything else, as we speak right now, is not allowed on the streets. but we're not talking, mopeds are licensed differently. I did find out from insurance companies that they do license, or they do require insurance, and they put basically motorcycle insurance on the vehicles. That much I do know. Other than that, when I ask questions, if owner A has 2 children and they are 14 years old, are they allowed to drive on city streets? He didn't have that answer at all, which raised concerns with me about the ordinance as a whole, but we can discuss that.
So I did want to mention one thing. You had questions about licensing and things like that. So they're licensed through the DNR. I'm not sure if this picture I took is on the back of a UTV. So that's actually like a 2022 tab, and then it has a number on it, and that's right on the back. So.
Yeah. I think Larry, when he mentioned the memo, he's going to explain, like, here's what can be licensed and how, and here's what may not be licensed, and how do we want to regulate it, I think will be really helpful for me.
And you should know that what Christy is showing you is not a motor vehicle license and does not entitle it to operate on the street. That's
right.
Because an ATV and a UTV are not motor vehicles that can be licensed in the state of Minnesota.
Right. Okay. That's what they received from the DNR, Larry, correct? What I said?
Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Do you, Larry, have the direction that you need from us and Brent?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is to get you more information, get the questions you answered last time, give you a memo that details it, and then you kind of got to walk through the policy points. And once kind of as a general rule of the policy points put together, I'm going to craft an ordinance that try and delivers what you want.
That sounds good. Brent, is that?
Do you think from a schedule standpoint, Larry, you're not available for the next meeting? Is that
not available? I'm out of town for the first meeting in July, so it'd have to be the second meeting in July.
Just for expectations. Yeah, I know, because I did send out email related to what our neighboring cities are allowing. Larry has that information too, just for some additional context.
Hey, Brett, you think it's important that Larry is here for that meeting, correct? So that we should wait?
Yeah, there's a level of specificity with statute that if it was very generic, I could carry the water on it, but not with this kind of level of licensing stuff. I don't know if I could do that to your satisfaction. Not you specifically, but the councils.
Yeah, and I normally I try not to have an overinflated in my own role in this, but I need to hear what you're saying. You're going to make some policy decisions, and I have to hear it and know what they are in order to craft what you want.
Right. Anything else under communications from you, Brent?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by
Councilmember
Henry.
I'll second.
We have a second by Councilmember Sayer. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye. Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mott.
Hi, Christy.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Hi, Courtney Johnson. All right. Thank you all. Motion passes. Have a good evening.